So first off, before we start this video, I know that there's some context like the first, second, and even the third Balkan War, which is the First World War. But really and truly, the Bulgarian Summer is something so intricate and something so specific that it actually deserves its own video, as it was the final couple of months before the Bulgarians picked the Central Powers or the Entente Powers. I do feel that the Bulgarian Summer, in some respects, is its own self-contained story within the whole of World War One. So, let's get to it. The summer months of 1915 saw a decisive clash between the diplomacy of the Entente forces and the Central Powers. Marshal Ducan, a young French historian, reporter for the French press, and witness to the critical events of 1915, summarized the importance of this period for the entire course of the war by simply naming it the Bulgarian Summer of 1915. Bulgaria's strategic geographical position and strong army in the Balkans now more than ever could provide a decisive advantage for the side that managed to win Bulgaria's support. For the Allies, Bulgaria could provide the needed support for Serbia in the Balkans, shore up the Russian defenses in the east, and effectively neutralize the Ottoman Empire, pinning it into the Balkan box. Also, for the Central Powers, it could ensure the defeat of Serbia for the Central Powers, do the exact opposite and cut off the Russians from the Allied forces in the west, and open up the way to Constantinople, so basically what the Entente wanted but in reverse. Thus securing the continuous Ottoman war effort in the Balkans and even the supplies from Germany and Austria-Hungary into the Ottoman Empire. So, both sides have promised more or less the fulfillment of the Bulgarian national aspirations, and the only problem facing the Bulgarian Prime Minister was how to secure maximum gains with exchange for minimum commitments. So during this time, many Entente and Central Powers dignitaries were sent to Sofia in an effort to secure Bulgaria's friendship and even their support. Allied representatives met with the leaders of the Bulgarian opposition parties. They also provided generous financial support for the opposition and their newspapers. They even attempted to bribe high-ranking government officials in Sofia. Germany and Austria-Hungary were not willing to remain on the sidelines, as Bulgaria was literally next to Austria-Hungary as well, and dispatched to Bulgaria Duke John Albert of Mecklenburg, the former ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, Hans-Pierre von Regenheim, and Prince Holle, who openly declared that after the defeat of Serbia, Bulgaria would assume hegemony in the Balkans. So what really seized Bulgarian interest the most was indeed the balance of military power on the European front. The situation of the major European fronts were at the time developing and marking them in the favor of the Central Powers. While the Allies' occupation and operations in Gallipoli turned into a costly stalemate in the Aegean Sea, the Russians were being driven out of Galicia and Poland, and Austria-Hungary was taking the lead in the east, and Germany as well. And there was also the infamous stalemate in the west of trench warfare. Under these circumstances, the Central Powers were hoping to secure Bulgaria at last. Still, it took the Entente diplomacy more than a month to give the answers to Radislavov's questions, and the replies were proving to be far from satisfactory. In reality, it hardly differed from the offers and even the promises that the Allies had presented in May. Than a month to give the answers to Radislavov's questions, and the replies were proving to be far from satisfactory. In reality, it hardly differed from the offers and even the promises that the Allies had presented in May. Once again, the promises lacked a clear guarantee that Serbia would see the desired lands, and there was not even a mention of southern Dobruja for Romania and southern Macedonia from Greece, which was Macedonia was in a weird place. It was not Yugoslavia yet, but it was not part of Greece nor Serbia really. So the southern Macedonian question was a really iffy one, but still they pressed for southern Macedonia. So in the eyes of the Bulgarians, this was a manifestation of the Entente helplessness in the face of the conflicting ambitions of its smaller Balkan allies, and even the big three, as they didn't even know how to split, well, what would become Turkey yet. So the diplomatic position of the Central Powers in Sofia were strengthened immensely, forcing the Bulgarian Tsar and Prime Minister Tsar Boris and Prime Minister Radislavov to assume the course towards the final alignment of the country on the side of the Central Powers of 1915. In August, a Bulgarian military mission led by Colonel Peter Ganchev, a former military attaché to Berlin no less, was dispatched to Germany to work with the details for a military convention and cooperation. Almost at the same time, Minister of War Lieutenant General Ivan Fashev resigned and was replaced as a minister by the pro-German Major General Nikolai Zhukov, not to be confused with Zhukov of Soviet fame, or Zhukov of, could that be his great-great-grandfather, Theodor Zinikov? Not really, no. So Radislavov also entered into talks with the Ottoman Empire, trying to gain concessions in exchange for Bulgarian benevolent neutrality. In this situation, Germany, unlike the allies of Britain, France, and Russia, especially on Serbia's side, was able to persuade its ally to at least consider serious notions of ceding some land and territory, and even some ships, to gain Bulgarian support. Still, the Ottomans were willing to continue the deal only after Bulgaria entered into an agreement with the Central Powers. So there's still that bait and hook thing. So it's not just like, here, have this land and okay, bye-bye. It's like a clause, if you get it. So throughout the month of August, which was pretty much the last month for both sides to actually have a chance at getting Bulgaria on their side, throughout the month of August, the Allied diplomatic activity grew to be even more incoherent. British and French diplomats began to realize that in the face of the stubborn Serbian and Greek refusals for any immediate concessions, that the best they could hope for was to keep Bulgaria neutral or literally sabotage Bulgaria's economy to the point where even if it wanted to declare war, that wasn't going to happen. So in the face of this diplomatic failure, the Entente even resorted to some very unusual means of keeping Bulgaria on the sidelines of this world war. So the Allies and the Bulgarian political sympathizers, or simps, attempted to bout the country's grain harvest and create a artificial food crisis that could possibly kill hundreds of thousands of people, but all to keep 100,000 troops out of the Balkans, right? Thank God, or thank Samina Brog. This affair was revealed to the Bulgarian government and the perpetrators were arrested. The Entente diplomats continued to pressure the Serbian government and the Serbian Prime Minister, finally forcing it and them to assume a more yielding position and attitude towards the buffer zone or middle crisis. So let's hear the demands, okay? So on the 1st of September 1915, the Serbian Prime Minister agreed to cede about half the So on the 1st of September 1915, the Serbian Prime Minister agreed to cede about half of the uncontested zone, but he also demanded that Serbia should keep most of the land west of the Vardar, including the towns of Prilip, Olid, and Valish. In return for these territorial concessions, the Allied powers had to allow Serbia to absorb Croatia and Slovenia, and possibly even Montenegro, and pretty much make Yugoslavia, and demanded that Bulgaria attack the Ottoman Empire immediately. The Serbian offer was unacceptable. What do you mean that this is the greatest trade deal in all of trade deals? You understand? I'm a great deal maker. You understand this, okay? The Serbian offer was unacceptable and most of the demands were rejected. At the same time, the Ententes were unaware of the negotiations between Bulgaria and the Central Powers had reached a critical phase. Okay, I'm gonna make the best trade deal. So on the 6th of September 1915, Bulgaria formalized its affiliation with the Central Powers by concluding 3 separate documents of political and military character. The first document was signed by Prime Minister Radislavov and the German ambassador Michaelis in Sofia. It was the Treaty of Amity and Alliance between the Kingdom of Bulgaria and the German Empire. Yeah. It consisted of 5 articles that were to remain in force for 5 years. According to the treaty, each of the contracting states agreed not to enter into an alliance or even an agreement that would be directed against the other. Germany was also obligated to protect. Oh boy, that's a long one. Germany was also obligated to protect the Bulgarian political independence and their territorial integrity against all attacks that could result without the provocation of the side of the Bulgarian government. In exchange, Bulgaria was also obligated and obliged to attack any of the neighboring states if they attacked Germany, declared war on Germany, or sided with the Allies in the Balkans and hit Austria-Hungary or Germany. So the second important document was actually a secret annex treaty in the Treaty of Alliance. It specified the territorial acquisitions that Germany granted and guaranteed to Bulgaria. The whole of Vardar and northern Macedonia, including the so-called contested and uncontested zone, plus parts of the old Serbia east of the Moldova River, in case Romania or Greece would actually attack Bulgaria or enter the war, or attack its allies, without any provocation. Germany would agree to the Bulgarian annexation of the lands that she had lost to these countries in the Treaty of Bucharest of 1913, or the Second Balkan War, and to the ratification of the Bulgarian-Romanian border as it was delimited and demarcated by the Treaty of Berlin of 1878. In addition, Germany and Austria-Hungary guaranteed the Bulgarian government a war loan of 200 million francs, and in case the war lasted longer than 4 months, they guaranteed an additional supplementary loan. The third document was concluded by the German Eastern Military Headquarters in Plies by the Chief of the German General Staff, Erich von Falkenhayn, and the Chief of the Austro-Hungarian General Staff, Count Franz Konrad von Hotzendorf, and the delegate of the Bulgarian government, Colonel Peter Ganchev. It was a military convention detailing the plans for the final conquest and the final defeat and the conquest of Serbia. Germany and Austria-Hungary were obliged to attack Serbia within 30 days of the signing of the convention, while Bulgaria had to do the same within 35 days of the date, so 2 months and a week. So Germany and Austria-Hungary were to field at least 6 infantry divisions for the attack, and Bulgaria at least 4 infantry divisions according to their established tables and organization and their logistics. All of these forces were to be placed under the command of General Field Marshal August von Mackensen, whose task was it to fight the Serbian army wherever he finds it and to open and ensure as soon as possible a land connection between Hungary and Bulgaria. Germany also pledged to assist with whatever war materials that the Bulgarians might need, unless it harmed Germany's own war effort. So 1880s, probably some 1890s, some louvers, like some sawtooth bayonets, stuff like that. So Bulgaria was also to mobilize at least 4 divisions within 15 days of the signing of the convention, and furnish at least 1 more division, which was to be outside of Mackensen's command and forces, that was to occupy Vardar and northern Macedonia. So basically an occupation force. So Bulgaria also pledged to keep strict neutrality against Greece and Romania for the duration of the war operations against Serbia, as long as these 2 countries remain neutral themselves. So the Ottoman Empire was given the rights to adhere to all points of the military convention, and Falkenhayn was to open immediate negotiations with the representatives of the 3 blind pashas. For its part, Bulgaria agreed to give full passage to all materials, soldiers, livestock, and whatever sent from Germany and Austria-Hungary to the Ottoman Empire as soon as a connection through Serbia, the Danube River, or Romania itself if they entered the war, spoiler alert, 4 months from now, had been opened. So on the same day, Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire concluded a separate agreement for the land that granted Bulgaria the possession of the remaining Ottoman lands west of the Morista River, including the 2-kilometer stretch or the 1,000 square mile stretched from the eastern bank that ran along the entire length of the river. This placed the railway of the Aegean port of Digadigajek and some 2,587 square kilometers or 999 square miles under Bulgarian control. And this is the official modern day border of Bulgaria and stuff. So on the 22nd of September, Bulgaria declared general mobilization, and Radislav stated that the country would assume a state of armed neutrality and that its neighbors should not perceive it as a threat. A threat, yeah? This event actually had the opposite effect, and it was actually indicative of the Second Balkan War. And this event was actually indicative of the Bulgarian intentions and prompted the Serbians to ask the Entente to support them in a preemptive strike against Bulgaria. The Allies were not really yet ready to help the Serbians in a military way and actually refused because they had Salonika, Gallipoli, Russia's in the east, Western Front stalemate in the west. I think they were chasing von Spee in the Atlantic and Caribbean Sea, and the Allies were not in the best position to do that stuff. Also, it was going on to winter, so that actually stops war to crawl. They actually started to focus their efforts instead on finding ways to delay as much as possible the seemingly imminent Bulgarian attack. Sazonov, the Serbian prime minister, angered by this Bulgarian betrayal, insisted that a clear ultimatum should be sent to the Balkan country. The French and the British resisted as they still thought they could snatch Bulgaria from the Germans. But they resisted at first, but eventually fell into line when the Russians asked them to, step up, because they were the protector of the Slavs and they were the manpower in the World War I. Actually, letting a couple of Russians go to the Western Front. On the 4th of October, the Entente presented the ultimatum demanding that all the German officers attached to Bulgarian army units and all of Central Power staff be sent home within 24 hours of the issuing of the ultimatum. On the previous day, a small Allied force had landed in Salonika, starting the Venizelos versus the King Constantine debacle that was kind of like a proto-civil war, but more of the Allies gaining influence in Greece. And I might do a video on that, but for right now, Radislavov did not really reply, and on the 5th of October, the Allies representatives asked for their passports and left Sofia until about 1923, never to see it again until 1923. On the 14th of October, Bulgaria declared war on Serbia, and the Bulgarian army invaded Serbian territory. British Prime Minister H.H. Asquith concluded that one of the most important chapters in the history of diplomacy has ended. He blames the heavy Allied diplomatic defeat on the Russians, but most of it on the Serbians for their obsessency and their cupidity. In military terms as well, Bulgaria's involvement also made the position of the Allies in Gallipoli untenable, and that was actually the final straw that broke the camel's back, and the smart and cunning withdrawal from Gallipoli, the only successful part of Gallipoli, began on the way when Bulgaria entered the war, like a week after. So, anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed. And while I do not really say Bulgaria enters the war, tune in next week for the Radislavov or the Bulgarians that held out at Doran Pass. I will say this is not a nice video. This is a great video to kind of. So what I'm really doing at the end of this all is actually to do what I would call a around the world in 50 days kind of thing, or finish videos for the month of December. There's 1989 to go. There is probably basically it's like from antiquity to basically something even contemporary, and even something as far as 2015. So while it's kind of like questions to be asked, like why was Saddam Hussein so petty and started the Kuwaiti fires, or why the Bulgarian Summer of 1915, which is an integral part of Bulgaria joining the war, but is more of the confined, more condensed story of Allied incompetence to really win over Bulgaria, Serbian stubbornness, and of course Germans telling them they could get whatever they wanted if we win. So there's no greater deal than that, right? So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good time. I'm going to redo it one more time quickly, and I do not know how we got to 20 minutes on this, but anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I don't know if I was too loud in some bits and not loud enough, but I did try to keep the pace of what I was doing. I'm gonna work on my breathing though, but I can't squeeze it in. But I guess the best way to know is when I'm saying something very, very fast at the end to try and finish up the breath. Just like I did, it was more of an exaggeration, but I was kind of running out of breath. But getting better, so we'll do one more video, and that would be the Ogaden one that I filmed the other day, and I think that should be it. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I will keep this one though, and I would do something else. Kind of tired. Going to be out tomorrow. Just gonna get some fresh air and go to a camp and help out and come back. Nothing serious. Probably this first and last day probably. But I guess it's a good day to get some exercise and get some fresh air. Beach, the beach is just like one day, so hopefully I can get to do one more. But if I can't, I would say this is pretty good, especially for the ending. But you should always start strong and end strong, so I was still trying to do one more quick. So anyway, enjoy, learn something. Hopefully Granny doesn't come in, and let's finish it.